It was a Sunday dinner. The kind that looked warm from the outside. A long table, dishes passed around, too much laughter, stories being retold for the 100th time. But I'd stopped expecting anything from those nights years ago. I showed up because I was expected to. Sat where there was space. Smiled when it was polite. Took seconds only when offered. I'd learned that much at least. I don't think they realized I was in the room when they said it. My brother Matthew had just finished telling a story about his promotion, the one Dad helped him land through connections. Everyone clapped like it was an Olympic medal. My sister Caitlin joked about how she'd probably have to babysit less now that her business was taking off. Mom asked what kind of bonus she got, and whether they were still going to take that trip to Greece. The whole table lit up at that. Laughter. Teasing. Toasts. Then someone, maybe Caitlin, maybe Matthew, said it loud enough to carry from the kitchen, where I was refilling the water jug. She's like the leftover child. You know, she's just there. There was a pause. Then a burst of laughter. And not the awkward kind, the belly kind. That's exactly right kind. Someone clinked a glass. Someone else said, she won't mind, she's always been the low-maintenance one. I didn't drop the jug. I didn't say a word. I just stood there for a second, gripping the cold plastic, my fingers tightening until the condensation dripped onto the floor. The leftover child. Not the quiet one. Not the strong one. Not even the forgotten one. Just leftover. Like a meal you didn't finish but kept in the fridge out of guilt. A presence that lingered. Not urgent. Not worth fussing over. But convenient. And always there. I walked back into the room with the water and poured it into their glasses like nothing had happened. They smiled at me. Some even said thanks. And I nodded, like I didn't hear it, like I didn't feel my stomach knot. But I had heard it. And it didn't feel new. The thing about being labeled quietly your whole life is that the loud moments don't shock you, they just confirm what you've always suspected. Growing up, Matthew got the football games and the college fund. Caitlin got the dance lessons, the praise, the emergency credit card just in case. I got the hand-me-downs. The secondhand praise. The "you're so independent, we don't worry about you." They thought that was a compliment. They thought being invisible was a strength. What they didn't understand was that independence wasn't my nature, it was my survival. I started paying my own phone bill at 16 because no one remembered to add me to the plan. I bought my own prom dress with babysitting money. I put myself through college on scholarships and vending machine dinners while Matthew crashed in Dad's condo downtown. Caitlin borrowed $5,000 from Mom for her first business venture. I never even asked what the interest rate was. I didn't ask for help. Not because I didn't need it. But because I learned early that asking just made people uncomfortable. It made them remember I existed. And now, years later, after all the shared bills, the favors, the "can you co-sign this real quick" requests, they still saw me as leftover. That night, I didn't confront anyone. I just smiled. Cleared the table. Went home. And opened a spreadsheet. Because if they wanted to treat me like a side dish, then they were about to find out who'd really been footing the bill for the whole meal. The night I opened that spreadsheet, I didn't even plan to do anything. Not really. I just wanted to see. I opened my bank statements. My emails. My messages from over the years. The ones that started with, "Hey, quick favor," or "could you cover this just for now," and ended with forgotten promises. Within 10 minutes, I had columns. Who asked? What for? When? How much? Paid back? It was a quiet excavation. In college, I loaned Caitlin $240 for a plane ticket after she missed her connection. She never brought it up again. Matthew temporarily moved into my apartment for 3 months during a job transition, His name was never on the lease, but the utilities doubled. My parents asked me to put the new family phone plan in my name because mine had the best credit score. I was 24. Then there was the joint loan for our dad's dental surgery. The one no one else qualified for. I didn't even flinch. I co-signed. I auto-paid. They said they'd send me their portions each month. They did. For 3 months. Then silence. I covered the rest for 2 years because I didn't want it to affect my credit. Because I didn't want to explain to Dad why collection calls were coming. Because I didn't want the shame of saying I couldn't do it. They assumed I just had it handled. That was always the story, I could handle it. But handling doesn't mean it didn't hurt. And being capable doesn't mean being disposable. Looking at that spreadsheet, the total was more than I expected. It wasn't just about the money, it was the patterns. The assumption that I'd always say yes. That I'd never ask questions. That I'd always be the one who didn't make a fuss. They relied on my silence like a utility. They mistook it for endless supply. And I think that's what hit me hardest. They didn't just overlook me, they depended on me not noticing. But I noticed now. And suddenly, it was so clear. The leftover child wasn't an accident, it was a category they created. A role. The one they didn't have to tend to. The one who showed up, paid up, shut up. Not anymore. I looked at my spreadsheet and realized, I wasn't angry. I was done. Not with love. Not with being part of the family. But with being the part they used without gratitude. So I started preparing. I drafted emails. Polite, professional. Outlining past debts, upcoming bills, and who now owed what. No threats. No emotion. Just clear documentation, with attached receipts. I scheduled cancellation dates for shared services. Not today. Not tomorrow. But soon. Because when people call you leftover, they're betting you'll never make the first move. They're betting you'll be too hurt to hold them accountable. But I wasn't hurt anymore. I was awake. And if they never remembered what I did for them, I was going to make sure they felt it. It didn't take long to realize just how much of their lives ran through me. At first it had seemed harmless, even helpful, putting the utilities in my name for the family home while Dad recovered, setting up the group Netflix under my account, handling the car insurance payments while Caitlin figured things out. None of it was meant to be permanent. None of it was supposed to be mine alone. But over time, it stuck. And they got used to it. Every time someone forgot a payment, I'd cover it to avoid late fees. Every time there was an unexpected charge or a service interruption, it was my phone that rang first. They counted on me not because I was close, but because I was convenient. Because I wouldn't complain. Because, in their words, I was the one who never made things complicated. I was the backup plan for people who never checked if I needed one myself. They called me reliable. They called me steady. They never called to say thank you. That was the thing, my usefulness was invisible. Not because they couldn't see it, but because it was easier for them to pretend it wasn't there. I realized I'd become the infrastructure of the family without ever being invited into the spotlight. While they passed around praise and applause at dinners, I sat at the far end of the table, holding the weight of the things that kept their world running. I wasn't a sibling to them. I was an asset. A shared resource. And the more I gave, the less I mattered. I began the process in silence. One by one, I started transferring responsibility. The family phone plan? I called the provider, explained I wanted to step off as the account owner, and had it split into individual lines. They'll need to set up new billing details within 2 weeks, the representative said. Perfect. The medical loan? I emailed the company and changed the primary contact to Matthew. After all, it was for Dad's surgery and he was the one who called me about it 2 years ago. The electric bill for my parents' house was next. I sent them a polite message, "Hey, I've handled this for the last few years, but I'm stepping back as of next month. You'll want to set up your own account to avoid disruption." I used professional language. No bitterness. Just facts. And receipts. I didn't do it out of spite. I wasn't looking to get back at anyone. I just finally saw the shape of the life I'd been supporting, and I was no longer willing to be the silent pillar. I'd watched them forget my birthday 5 years in a row. I'd watched Caitlin post photos of the trip she took with money I had loaned her and never got back. I'd watched my mother tell her friend at church that she was so proud of her kids, naming Matthew's job, Caitlin's salon, and ending with, "And our youngest is doing fine too. Quiet one. She doesn't need much." That last part always stung more than I could admit. Because I did need things. I needed acknowledgement. I needed respect. I needed space to be something more than the one who kept the lights on. They wouldn't see it coming. And I didn't want them to. I wanted it to be like all the work I did for them, quiet, unnoticed, taken for granted. Until suddenly, it wasn't there. And then, they'd notice. When the bills came in their name. When the services stopped working. When the calls for late payments started going to them instead of me. When they felt the absence of the person they used to call leftover, and realized that without me, the table they all feasted at was held up by a single leg they never once thanked. It began on a Wednesday. Quiet, like most things I did. The first email went out to the group thread, "As of the 15th, I'll no longer be covering the internet bill. Please make arrangements accordingly." No explanation. No follow-up. Just a polite exit. I watched the scene receipts light up one by one. No one replied. Not right away. Maybe they thought I was bluffing. Maybe they thought someone else would convince me to keep things going. But I wasn't bluffing. And no one spoke. That Friday, I canceled the auto payment for the electric bill. I knew my parents would get the first alert by the following week. I didn't feel guilty. Not even when I imagined my mother's confusion. Not even when I pictured my father asking Caitlin if it was a mistake. They'd call it sudden. But it wasn't sudden. It was overdue. Then came the notifications. Caitlin messaged me first. "Hey, did something happen with the phone plan? My service is acting weird." I replied, "Yeah, I transferred the account ownership. You'll have to activate your own line now. Should be simple." She sent back a single question mark. Then nothing. Matthew called me. I let it ring. Then I texted back, "If it's about the insurance, it's under your name now. You should have received the email." 3 hours later he replied, "So you're just dumping everything back on us now?" No. I wasn't dumping anything. I was returning it. There's a difference. I had held it all together for years without thanks, without reminders, without even the courtesy of inclusion. They didn't ask me if I was okay carrying all of it. So I didn't ask them if they were okay holding their own weight. What surprised me most wasn't the anger. It was the confusion. Like they genuinely didn't understand why I would pull away. As if I hadn't already pulled away 1,000 times before, emotionally, mentally, piece by piece, every time they forgot to mention me in the family toast or left me out of the vacation photos. I hadn't been included in a family group trip in over 6 years. I hadn't been asked how I was doing in nearly 10. But I was always the one they came to when rent was late or when something needed fixing or when a name had to be put on paper. They thought my usefulness was infinite. They thought I wouldn't break. But I hadn't broken. I'd simply stepped away. And now the balance was shifting. When the cable stopped working, my mom called. She left a message saying, "Honey, I think something's wrong with the TV. We can't get the channels to load." I didn't call back. I forwarded her the email confirming the service cancellation. I never said another word. Let them sit with the silence. Let them call the providers. Let them speak to the customer service reps, spell their names out, figure out how to make a payment on time. Let them taste the inconvenience I swallowed every month on their behalf. I wasn't being cruel. I was being fair. For the first time. And in that silence, I felt something strange. Not joy. Not revenge. Just space. Room to breathe. Room where the constant weight of obligation used to sit. I made dinner for myself. Ate at a table with no expectations. No running tally of what I owed or who I was disappointing. For once, I wasn't making myself smaller to fit the role they gave me. I was just living. And if they felt the sting of absence now, it was because I'd finally stopped cushioning the blow. The backlash didn't come all at once. It crept in like the cold, slow, bitter, and unavoidable. Matthew was the first to snap. He sent a long message, accusing me of being petty and ungrateful. He said family helps each other, and I was being selfish for backing out when they needed me most. I stared at the screen for a long time before responding. I didn't defend myself. I didn't list every bill I'd covered or every favor I'd quietly fulfilled. I simply wrote, "You needed me for years. You just never said thank you." He left me on read. Then Caitlin tried guilt. Her message came with emojis, as if softening the blow would make the words sweeter. "It's just hard, you know? We're all juggling things. You could have told us before making things complicated." I almost laughed. Complicated. As if it hadn't been complicated for me the moment I was pressured to co-sign loans I never benefited from. As if the quiet pressure of being responsible for everyone else's convenience wasn't already suffocating. I replied, "It was complicated for me. You just never noticed." She didn't write back either. But it was my mother's response that landed the hardest. Not because it was cruel, but because it was empty. She left a voicemail. Her voice was tired, but not apologetic. "I don't know why you're doing this, sweetheart. We thought you were okay handling it all. You never said anything. And now it just feels like you're trying to make a point." I didn't return the call. Because she was right, I was making a point. Not to punish them, but to remind them I existed. Not just as the helpful one. Not just as the one who could be counted on. But as a person who bled quietly under the weight of their forgetfulness. The mail at their houses began arriving in their names again, late fees, missed payments, billing notices. The safety net I had built with my own credit, my own patience, had been pulled away. And now they were scrambling. Caitlin had to call the utility company twice because she couldn't remember how to set up auto-pay. Matthew asked if I could just walk him through the loan system one last time. I said no. Not because I was cruel. But because I had nothing left to give them that they hadn't already taken without acknowledgement. There was a part of me, the old part, that still felt the twitch of guilt. The same part that once apologized when they forgot my birthday. The part that tried to smooth things over when I wasn't even the one who caused the problem. But that part had shrunk. Not vanished, but no longer in charge. I had learned to sit with the discomfort of being misunderstood. I had learned that letting people down who never lifted you up is not betrayal, it's liberation. They weren't used to hearing no from me. They weren't used to seeing boundaries. They were used to a version of me that always smiled, always picked up the phone, always said, "Don't worry, I've got it." That version didn't vanish in a dramatic explosion. She just stopped showing up. And the space she left behind wasn't angry, it was clean. Sharp. Honest. For the first time, they were feeling the weight of what I'd carried for years. And for the first time, I wasn't rushing to rescue them from it. I moved into a new place not long after. A modest apartment tucked above a coffee shop, with creaky floors and soft morning light that came through linen curtains I picked out just for me. No one helped me move. I didn't ask. I boxed my life up in silence and unpacked it the same way, deliberately, carefully, with the kind of attention no one else had ever offered me. For the first time, everything in the space belonged to me. Every chair, every spoon, every unpaid debt that wasn't hanging around my neck like a chain. There were no shared bills taped to the fridge. No surprise charges showing up in my inbox. Just clean counters, quiet mornings, and the sound of my own breathing. It was strange how loud peace could be. They still didn't understand. Or maybe they did and just didn't want to say it out loud. No one apologized. No one admitted how much they'd leaned on me, or how lightly they'd tossed that label, leftover child, like it didn't mean anything. But I didn't need them to. I wasn't waiting for some grand moment of recognition. I wasn't hoping they'd show up at my door and say, "We're sorry we made you feel small." Because I wasn't small anymore. I had stretched into my own life. I had stepped out of the role they wrote for me. And I wasn't going back. Every now and then, I'd get a message. A casual check-in from Caitlin, a photo from Matthew of his kid holding a thank you note they finally wrote, years too late. My mom sent recipes sometimes, like that was our version of connection. I didn't ignore them. I responded when I wanted to. Kindly. Briefly. But I never offered more than I felt like giving. I had stopped living in debt, emotional, financial, or otherwise. They thought calling me independent was a compliment. What they didn't realize is that independence was something I built because I had no choice. I became self-sufficient not because they taught me how, but because they taught me I'd be on my own even with a house full of people. And now that I truly was alone, it didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Sometimes I think back to that dinner. The laughter. The smugness in their voices. The way no one flinched when I was made the punchline. It used to hurt. It used to echo inside me like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. Now, it's just a distant noise. Faint. Powerless. Because I don't live in that house anymore, not physically, not emotionally, not financially. I left the dishes. I left the phone plans. I left the unpaid balances taped to their names like receipts stapled to memory. I didn't burn bridges. I didn't slam doors. I didn't scream or cry or beg to be seen. I simply left. Quietly. On time. With the lights off and the balance settled. And I walked into a life that was mine alone, not borrowed, not shared, not owed. They called me the leftover child. But I was never the scraps. I was the one who made the meal. And now, they're left picking through what's left, trying to piece together a life without the one person who made it quietly livable.